So it's so wonderful to be with you all again here at the Lamarasi Namahata program. As we were driving in earlier, a few hours ago, I was explaining to His Grace Madana-mohan Prabhu how important Lamarasi is in the history of Srila Prabhupada's movement in South Africa. In a sense, one could say Lamarasi could be considered the birth site of Prabhupada's ＩSKCON in South Africa. So we're very fortunate to be gathered here at the place where Krishna consciousness took off in South Africa by the grace of Srila Prabhupada. He sent disciples here, especially Shuddhi Prabhu. And Shuddhi Prabhu was based in Lamarasi for a few months, actively preaching from here. So very nice to come here and be remembering Prabhupada's grace, and you're all very fortunate to be living here as well. I've come here a few times to do programs and attend programs, but when I noted that Madana-mohan Prabhu was free this evening, I naturally jumped at the opportunity because, I know myself to some extent, and I know Prabhu to a little extent, and I just felt that you all having his association would be, such a treat, such a blessing. I was very, very happy that he was free and agreed to come. So I'm just here as a bit of a curtain raiser to chant Jai Radha Madhava, and then we'll hear from Prabhu on this very important topic that was assigned to us, to him, to speak. And please pay careful attention and immerse yourself in the science of Krishna consciousness that His Grace Madana-mohan Prabhu will share with us now.
Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Nityanamane Namaste Sarasvati Devi Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschata Deshatarine Vancha Kalpataram Vishcha Kripa Sindhu Bhyevacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. Well, first of all, thank you, Swarup Damodar Prabhu, for your kind invitation to come here to the very special Namahata, special place. The topic assigned for today's discussion for both of us is our time is running out, are we spiritually ready? And I'm reminded that we have to finish the talk in about 25-30 minutes, so the topic is quite literally applicable to our presentation. It is running out. But as Swarup Damodar Prabhu was singing Jai Radha Madhava, I was thinking about what actually merits the time spent by all of you and by the two of us here tonight in this assembly discussing this topic or any other topic for that matter. Srila Prabhupada oftentimes spoke about the importance of presenting Krishna consciousness as it is. We have in front of us the Bhagavad Gita, which he very boldly called As It Is. And that title, As It Is, applies to everything Srila Prabhupada himself did and taught his followers and disciples to do. He explained to us that there is a very thin line between genuine Krishna consciousness, which he was not shy to call spiritual science. Science is something that can be verifiable, something that brings about predictable results, and something that changes the quality of our life in a very tangible and positive way. And on the one hand, and on the other hand, something that becomes just a retelling of fables, stories, mythology, these mindless rituals and kind of superstitious ideas we hold on to in our life. And there is a thin line that Srila Prabhupada oftentimes spoke about and warned his disciples against. In his words, in his mouth, the word professional, and a professional reciter of Srimad Bhagavatam, a professional kirtan leader, a professional worshipper of the deities, professional devotee in general was a derogatory term. Nowadays, of course, the word professionalism is a sign or a mark of true accomplishment, a sign of quality, but not in Prabhupada's mouth. In his mouth, professionalism was a synonym of someone who makes a living out of spirituality by catering to the needs, to the polluted desires of people in general. It just so happens in some parts of the world, Indian spirituality is in fashion, or kirtans are becoming in fashion in so many parts of the world, and so many other things might become in fashion, and people might latch onto those trends. And before we know, Srila Prabhupada warned us that we can also turn Krishna consciousness into something that doesn't really change anything. Just like in economies of this world, sometimes that phenomenon of inflation is when currency is being issued by the central bank in such profusion that it loses its value. And eventually, even though there are so many zeros, and I've been to countries which everyone is a millionaire, basically, because there are many zeros, like I won't mention any places, but they have very little value. So Srila Prabhupada also reminded us that the same as our words in our life, it has to have a value. And just like currencies issued by central banks, they're backed up by some, what they call them, fiat or tangible values, gold or some other commodities that never lose value, that are the standard of values in this life. In the same way, Srila Prabhupada explained that the words that we speak exchange not just in an official formal setting like we have now, Swarup Damodar Prabhu and myself are supposed to speak on that important topic, but also in our private, so to say, lives, in our general lives, there are effects, there are results of words spoken in connection with Krishna, backed up, if you will, by that tangible value of Krishna consciousness, and words spoken in vain, which actually rob us of the purpose of life and the purpose of words themselves. Because finally we don't even believe what we say to people when we wish, what we present as important or valuable, because eventually, if it's as the second canto of Srimad Bhagavatam explains to us through the mouth of Lord Vishnu to Lord Brahma, he says, "No, Brahma, please know that whatever seems to have any value, but doesn't have any connection with me, that is Maya." That is what Krishna calls the glittering of light in darkness. It has a connection with Krishna, but very tangential, very indirect connection. And eventually, even though it does appear to be glittering, it doesn't serve any purpose he could attain by a tangible source of light, like the sun or the moon or fire. All it does is just entertains us. So Srila Prabhupada explains that the art of speaking on spiritual science is something that he really wanted his disciples to master. Not master just in their words, but also in their lives. And that's why I was actually thrilled to have an opportunity to be sitting here in your assembly in the presence of Swarup Damodar Prabhu. It might come as a surprise to him what I'm going to say next, because he is, in my eyes, he's been, and I'm saying that, please, Prabhuji, I do want to say that in the context of what I just explained, not as platitudes or some kind of pleasantries, but there are devotees, when you look at them and you see how they have dedicated their lives to their spiritual master's service, to the mission of ИСККОН, and you see the challenges they went through, and you see that those challenges, just like as Krishna explains in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, he compares bhakti, the process of bhakti, to a fire or metallurgical process. When you have that rough, raw ore metal ore, like gold ore, and you put it through the metallurgical process, what emerges from that very rigorous and intense process of smelting and purifying and mixing with different chemicals is pure gold. And Krishna says in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, this is what bhakti should be. It should reach a certain point of intensity, enough to melt the impure gold of our bhakti of hearts. Because without reaching that melting point, it's impossible to purify gold. You can rub it with the best detergent powder in the world, with brush and soap. Boil it in water, it will never get purified. The only thing that can purify gold is melting it and then smelting it or mixing it with different metallurgical substances that remove the impurities. And what it does also, those impurities, they become oxidized. I'm a chemist by education, as you heard, so I have to live up to the presentation. And then they rise to the surface, and then the metallurgist, the chemist, collects them and discards of them, and then what is remaining is pure gold. So it should be a certain level of intensity. And below that, there is no predictable result. You can try and heat that gold below the melting point as long as you want it. All you'll get is a very warm piece of impure gold for as long as you want. There shouldn't be a certain level that is the turning point, after which, and Prabhupada defined it for us again as a spiritual scientist, and should I also proudly say as a chemist himself. Srila Prabhupada was a chemist, right? As we know. He showed us that melting point, the minimal level of intensity. Of course, it's the minimal. It can go further up and can go faster from that point onwards, but the 16 rounds of very attentive, offenseless chanting of the Hare Krishna mantra, following the four regulative principles, and very importantly, associating with devotees who maintain that determination in us to keep in the process, who maintain what's very important. I will get back to Swarup Damodar Prabhu, I haven't forgotten. I'll get back. But who maintain in us the faith that this process actually works. And I can tell you, dear devotees, for myself, honestly, that my own faith in devotional service for whatever years I've been practicing it is maintained by the success stories of devotees. And now coming back to Swarup Damodar Prabhu, who's been serving his spiritual master, His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj, again hero for the entire ISKCON. Just this morning I was listening to A. Prabhupada's morning walk in Delhi on the 27th of August 1976, and Giriraj Maharaj was right there in Lodi Garden with Prabhupada, walking with him and telling him very blissfully about, giving the report about the temple construction in Vrindavan, how they furnished the temple with nice furniture and they put very specially carved marble on the pillars and everything. Prabhupada was palpably happy, glad and satisfied with Giriraj Maharaj, and that's the sign of success, is someone gives himself or herself to the service of the spiritual master, or should I say plural, the spiritual masters, plural. Not just Diksha Guru, the Diksha Guru, Shiksha Gurus, they all come in different shapes and forms, but whoever gives us that impetus in spiritual life by opening up our eyes and maintaining that intense fire of spiritual life which transforms us rather than just makes us comfortably warm and cozy in devotional service, they are gurus, and they deserve the same respect, and they deserve to be followed, they deserve to be quoted, they deserve to be emulated and served. And when we serve such spiritual masters, what happens is that our theoretical knowledge, whatever we glean from the Bhagavad Gita or from Bhagavatam, from the lectures, all that information which there is no shortage of these days, turns into realization. Now we can live it. So when I first started visiting, attending the GBC meetings in Mayapur, I was very intrigued by the persona of Swarup Damodar Prabhu, because to me he saw somebody, how would I say that? I was trying to come up with proper words to describe Prabhuji, the feeling I got from being around him. We didn't interact much, even though I just saw him serving in different capacities. I think Prabhuji also served on the strategic planning team of the GBC. And now as he was singing, I came up actually with that definition I could pin to Swarup Damodar Prabhu. I remembered a statement by Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur said once, he said, I don't read books, I read the authors. What I do is I proofread people and I see what they fall short of expectations, of what they say themselves. I see through the hypocrisy and pretentiousness and things like that. So I'm a proofreader of men. I am the proofreader of the world. That's what he said. And I got that feeling from Swarup Damodar Prabhu. I thought when I first, or for the very first times when I saw him, I thought, well, you've got to watch out. If you are somewhere around him, he'll see through all that veneer of whatever you want to put on the show. And I think it's very helpful and very healthy to have such devotees in our lives. Somebody who do not just settle for platitudes and pleasantries, those who actually help us, could hold up a mirror, if you will, to our face, or could be just their own, by their own presence, they could be the standard that we can measure ourselves against and see where we're fall short of responsibilities, of expectations, of the presentations of our, or external projections of our personalities in devotional service. They might not even know that. They might not even know that we are measuring ourselves up against them. But that's this important service that they do, and we always have to find such devotees in our lives. Those who remind us of what the goal is. Otherwise, I don't have any hope. I will just, again, fall into that comfortable, what's the word, comfort zone, thinking myself to be already a devotee, already a, whatever was presented about me, a preacher and teacher and this and that. All these are also important. We don't want to demystify them too much, because then people won't have anything to look up to. But then within the hearts of our hearts, we have to have someone who we can hold on to. And I know that in Swarup Damodar Prabhu's, again, in his life, there are such personalities. And recently we had a very nice discussion, and he shared with me his appreciation of some of the great devotees in our movement who he looked up to and saw as beacons of success in spiritual life. And now going back to His Holiness Giriraj Maharaj, once I was fortunate to listen to his class. And in his class, he surprisingly shared with us, it was a large audience, I think it was in Ukraine, and he shared with us what he saw as pillars of his faith in Krishna consciousness. And it's something very unusual to hear from a devotee who is supposed to be the pillar himself, right? But then it turns out that they also have pillars that they stand upon. And he said that he has, from what I remember, Swarup Damodar Prabhu may correct me if I miss one or two, but I do remember two distinctly. He said, number one is that I can see that what Srila Prabhupada gave us is the real deal, a genuine spiritual science by several things. And one of them was the accomplishments of his disciples. And the particular example he quoted was the example of his godbrother, Srila Gopal Krishna Goswami Maharaj. Just a couple of hours ago at Naveen Prabhu's house, we were remembering how just in one city of Delhi alone, Srila Gopal Krishna Maharaj managed to construct how many? 10 large temples and 12 small temples, so that in one Janmashtami day, through one temple, or east of Kailash temple, has almost 1 million visitors in one day. And that's just one of the 12 temples. So I guess it's the entire city of Delhi, because of the service of Gopal Krishna Maharaj, is going through in his ИСККОН temple for Janmashtami. And Prabhupada started very humble in Delhi. It was extremely humble. It was with Greater Kailash, was a rented place, and they hardly had any following. And I listened to Prabhupada's recordings of him complaining about how his own disciples were not following the principles strictly, like that, was getting on their case. But now, because of his disciples, empowered by Srila Prabhupada, we have this no less than a revolution of Krishna consciousness, and that's everywhere. Prabhuji was speaking about Juhu, Mumbai, again, 1.5 million people in one day. So that's one of the reasons for optimism. These are questions, right? Okay. And I have 5 minutes to wrap up, to actually start my presentation. It was just, well, I think we won't even get to the Bhagavatam verse, because after all, our time is running out. Are we spiritual already? And I'm trying to explain how to become spiritual already before the time runs out. And the second is, it's even more important. He says, Giriraj Maharaj says, I see the accomplishments of devotees in their spiritual lives at the time of their departure. And he named a few. I think he even wrote a book called Many Moons, right? And in that book he listed some of the illustrious examples of him god brothers and god sisters who actually showed in no unclear terms how accomplished their life was because of following Srila Prabhupada. Strictly one particular example comes to my mind, a devotee named Ramadas, a Prabhupada's disciple who was, I don't remember where he was, in Chicago, somewhere he was a head pujari, and he took such great care of devotees, but then he developed an incurable disease, a life-threatening disease, and he got an advance warning, so to say, so he never wasted any time. He went to Vrindavan and stayed there for the rest of his short life. After that, it was a very short time. But then what happened, Giriraj Maharaj was telling us, he started coming to his devotees, the devotees who he took care of while he was the head pujari very well. He was so Krishna conscious, and he started coming to their dreams by in his usual blissful self, smiling and blissful, and he said, I cannot tell you what it is, but it's worth every single bit of austerity. Just continue. I cannot tell you. Something like that Maharaj told us. Just continue. Don't have any doubt. What you're going to get is beyond your imagination. Like that. And it's so important for us to see. If you go to a doctor, it's important for us to see the patients he or she have treated successfully. I mean, treated is one thing, but successfully cured. And as we go through this process of devotional service, we must have success stories in our own lives or in the lives of devotees around us, and we have to search for them very actively. And you can see the examples of devotees who have dedicated their lives to Srila Prabhupada. Like Prabhupada famously told his disciple Tamal Krishna Maharaj when he was going through that famous glorious fight for Juhu. And Tamal Krishna Maharaj at one point complained to Prabhupada saying, Srila Prabhupada, I know the civil code of Juhu better than the Bhagavad Gita. Because he had to go to court, there was a lot of litigation involved, and the people on the other side were so treacherous and so tricky and so sneaky and well connected, and they could easily outmaneuver Prabhupada's disciples, right? And there were so a few points when they were actually almost successful in cheating Prabhupada out of his property. And Prabhupada told Tamal Krishna one thing that he oftentimes quoted. He said, just give me this one life, and I'll take care of the rest. One life. And that's what Krishna says in the 11th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam when he explains to Uddhava the science of Krishna consciousness. He says, kind of incredulously muses out loud. He says, I don't know how they do that, my devotees. They seem to be so tricky themselves, so sneaky, because they give to me one short, temporary, miserable life, kind of useless for all intents and purposes, give that to me, and in return from me, they get an eternal, blissful, spiritual life in the spiritual world. How do they do that? What's that? A trade-in, right? You submit your useless phone, and then you get a little cash or something, the card, a bonus card, and then you contribute it towards a new phone. But the new phone costs almost as much as without that bonus, and doesn't add any value. But here it's a different story. They give me my one useless, miserable material life, temporary life, and in exchange for that useless thing, they get eternal spiritual life, blissful life in the spiritual world. How does it work? Krishna says, and we know how it works. So I'm going to, first of all, thank Swarup Damodar Prabhu for the opportunity to be next to him. You can see that just by sitting next to him, somehow I get those. Those are not my words. Somehow I wasn't going to speak about it. It was just Prabhuji's presence. In his presence, somehow even someone like myself can speak meaningful words. But I wanted to read one very short but important verse from the Bhagavatam, and also a very short purport on this verse from Srila Prabhupada. I deliberately didn't tell Swarup Damodar Prabhu what this verse was on the way, because I knew he didn't need it. But also when you are confronted with a verse you have to speak on somehow without prior preparation, then the natural, the actual nectar comes, right? You know that, right? Sometimes. So just to address the point, just to do justice to the topic assigned to both of us, I'll read the verse and I'll read the purport, and I won't say a word. After that, I'll turn it over to Swarup Damodar. Now he has a prior warning. So I will just read one verse, because I think that verse by itself, and look at that, it's page 1000. 1000, I don't know. See? I think that verse by itself answers this question. The question was, or the topic was, our time is running out, are we spiritually ready? So I'll read that verse as an answer to that question, and I'll let Swarup Damodar Prabhu, if there's anything that needs to be clarified, clarify that for us, myself included. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya, Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chahanaram Tamam Devim Saraswatim Yasam Tato Yamandirayat. So this is verse number 4 from the 18th chapter of the first canto of Bhagavatam, called Parikshit Cursed by Brahmana Boy. Because this verse starts with the word, this was so because, it kind of leaves it hanging in the context. I'll read the translation of the previous, just the translation of the previous 3 verses, so you can understand the point that this verse is making by saying this was so because. And then Sutta Goswami said, due to the mercy of the personality of Godhead, Shri Krishna, who acts wonderfully, Maharaja Parikshit, though struck by the weapon of the son of Drona in his mother's womb, could not be burned. So that's number 1. Please mark it. Number 1 is the son of Maharaja, the son of Maharaja Parikshit, the son of Uttara, was not burned in the womb of his mother because of Krishna. Number 2. Furthermore, Maharaja Parikshit was always consciously surrendered to the personality of Godhead. Interesting way, Prabhupada speaking, continuing the same topic we started describing, that we have to be consciously surrendered to the personality of Godhead, and therefore he was neither afraid nor overwhelmed by fear due to a snake bird which was to bite him because of the fury of a Brahmana boy. That's number 2. Number 1, he wasn't burned in the womb. Number 2, he was not afraid or overwhelmed by the otherwise very fearsome appearance of the snake bird which was supposed to kill him. And number 3, furthermore, after leaving all his associates, the king surrendered himself as a disciple to the son of Vyasadeva, Shukadev Goswami, and thus he was able to understand the actual position of the personality of Godhead. So these are the 3 verses which lead up to the verse which I'm going to read right now, with a short purport by Srila Prabhupada. The verse goes like that. Nottama shloka vartanam jushatam tat kathamritam syatsam brahmanta kalipi smaratam tat pajambujam. And now you understand why the verse starts with the words, this was so because. What was so because? Let's remember. Number 1, he was not burned by Brahmastra in the womb. Number 2, he was not afraid of snake bird. And number 3, he was able to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by having accepted the shelter of Shukadeva Goswami, his spiritual master. This was so because those who have, and now I'm going to read the translation, and if I may, please forgive me, you're like a family, and I am, as was obvious, it's my first time in your family, and usually when you come to a family, or a very closely, tightly knit community of devotees, you understandably feel a little bit timid and kind of a little bit self-conscious, because you don't want to say anything that will make a fool out of yourself, or some kind of like you don't understand the factor in the relationships of individuals, their seniority and the positions and like that, their interconnections. You have to be, at least I want to be first of all familiar with the social and spiritual context that I am walking into. So please forgive me if I ask you to remember to take away 3 things from today's verse. It's a bit presumptuous of me to ask you that, but still, it's Prabhupada's words and the words of the Bhagavatam, so we can definitely mark those 3 principles, key factors of success in being spiritually ready when the time is running out. And Parikshit Maharaj has every right to say, my time is running out, give me something substantial, don't waste my time on any secondary or unnecessary topics. So the verse explains, this was so because those who have dedicated their lives to the transcendental topics of the personality of Godhead, of whom the Vedic hymns sing, and who are constantly engaged in remembering the lotus feet of the Lord, do not run the risk of having misconceptions, even at the last moment of their lives. So in the last moment of their lives, and Prabhupada will now explain in his very short 1-paragraph commentary on this verse what this means. But the verse itself speaks of 3 factors of success. Uttama shloka vartanam, devotees, those who build their lives basically or literally around topics of Krishna. Uttama shloka vartanam, those whose lives rotate. Vartana means rotate around. Uttama shloka varta. Uttama shloka, the topics of Krishna. Jujatam tat kathamritam, those who feel pleasure in discussing these topics. So their lives are rotating, or they have that as a pivot in their time. Everything spins around the ability, the chance, the time to hear about Krishna, and they take pleasure in doing so. In number 3, smaratam tat padambujam, because of that, because of regularity and happiness, they develop an ability to think about Krishna's lotus feet, naturally, spontaneously. And for them, na syat sambramante kalipi, at the end of their lives, the fear of bewilderment is not threatening them. It's not for them. So Srila Prabhupada explains in his purport, the highest perfection of life is attained by remembering the transcendental nature of the Lord at the last moment of one's life. This perfection of life is made possible by one who has learned the actual transcendental nature of the Lord from the hymns sung by a liberated soul like Shukadev Goswami or someone in that line of disciplic succession. There is no gain, Prabhupada says, in hearing the Vedic hymns from some mental speculator. We spoke about it a little bit, that it devalues the otherwise spiritual messages of the Bhagavad Gita or Srimad Bhagavatam if they are narrated by someone who doesn't actually believe in what he or she say and don't live according to them. When the same is heard from an actual self-realized soul and is properly understood by service and submission, and this service and submission is, again, please forgive me, Swarup Damodar Prabhu, but I see in the lives of such dedicated devotees like yourself and other devotees, by service and submission, what we hear from the words of the spiritual master and Srimad Bhagavatam and Bhagavad Gita come to life. Everything becomes transparently clear. Thus, a submissive disciple is able to live transcendentally and continue to the end of life. By scientific adaptation, one is able to remember the Lord even at the end of life, when the power of remembrance is slackened due to derangement of bodily membranes. Prabhupada speaks about it in a physiological way when there is a derangement. And if any of you are medical practitioners, you probably know. And even those of you who haven't, who are not medical practitioners, but who saw death up close, you see how it happens. The body becomes breaking down and the faculties shut down one after another. What's left for us? And Prabhupada explains, for a common man it is very difficult to remember things as they are at the time of death. But by the grace of the Lord and His bona fide devotees, the spiritual masters, plural, one can get the opportunity without difficulty. And it was done in the case of Maharaja Parikshit. And now I hand it to Swarup Damodar Prabhu. Thank you. No, I already said so much. Because one of the reasons why I also look forward to hearing from Swarup Damodar Prabhu is because just a few days ago he gave a class in Sri Radha Radhanath temple, and he spoke about it. He spoke about how if a devotee follows the principles of devotional service properly, then he doesn't run the risk of forgetting Krishna at the end of life. And there was a question after the class, whether we'll be able to make it in one lifetime. And I felt very inspired by Prabhuji's answer, so I just hope that this purport and the verse might prompt him to continue along the same inspiring line.
Hare Krishna. Om Jnana-timirandasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Vicha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. So Madana-mohan Prabhu, he mentioned, quoting Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur, that describing himself to be a proofreader of his disciples, a proofreader of men. And for some confused reason, Madana-mohan Prabhu likened me to that ability. So I'm going to proofread his class now. And quite frankly, for the most part, I would say 90% of it, he was really spot on in the philosophy of Krishna consciousness. But I think when we visited Naveen Prabhu's house a couple of hours ago, the coconut water drink that he had may have been spiked. And so he did mess up some parts of the class, especially when he's trying to relate Krishna consciousness and the approach to Krishna consciousness and the efficacy of dedicated, consistent, sincere and humble, guided practice, the result that approach yields. Likening that to me, I do feel was somewhat erroneous. But however, even though it's erroneous, it is very deeply appreciated and accepted by me as a reminder of what is expected. You know, for those who have been given a lot, much is expected from them. And I can honestly say that in my life of Krishna consciousness, so much has been given. So much has been given by the grace of Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada's dedicated followers. And I thank my lucky stars every day for that presence in my life of Srila Prabhupada and all his followers. So yeah, it's something for me to look forward to dedicate myself to, and I thank Madana-mohan Prabhu for reminding me of what lay ahead, although he couched it in a way of appreciation. This topic and this verse and purport that Prabhuji shared with us now, it's so significant in the lives of all of us. I was sharing on the way here that I do feel that as devotees, our community, although we are so well established and so much is going on, we have so many services, I do somehow feel that we do lack a sense of urgency in our Krishna consciousness. We are pretty happy to, if we have a little more advanced car, we're pretty happy to hit a certain speed just under the speed limit, and we hit, what do we hit that button called? Cruise control. And we just coast away in Krishna consciousness, thinking, yes, this is gonna be cool. I can sit back and relax. I've done my 6 months or 1 year of chanting Hare Krishna. I attended the ISKCON Disciples course. I've attended the temple. I got to know the mentors and the temple president. I'm now initiated. I'm done. I'm sailing. Cruise control. No, 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 no. It does not work like that. It does not work like that. One of our very dear spiritual masters, unfortunately, passed away some years ago. He would often say that if you are casual in your Krishna consciousness, you will end up a casualty, right? So, as it's sometimes said in America, you are cruising for a bruising. So if you are happy to be on cruise control, something's going to happen. We're going to get some reversal. So yes, the sense of urgency needs to be appreciated by us. Really deeply needs to be appreciated by us. Because time is passing. And imperceptibly so, we can experience the effects of time. How many of you remember COVID? 2020, March, we were in lockdown, we were socially isolating, social distancing, we weren't gathering. And for maybe a year or so, a year and a half, we weren't interacting, we weren't seeing each other, in person. And then suddenly we get together and you look at someone, oh, this person has grown old. Or you look at a little child, like a 2-year-old child, and they've doubled in size in that 1.5 years that you haven't seen them. So people have aged, and people are looking at us. We don't realize and say, oh, you've also aged a lot. So we don't realize it, what has happened. Because time works like that. It's so imperceptible. It's so insidious that you don't realize what's happening. And you just continuously live in an oblivion, not understanding how the time factor is slowly and methodically and systematically eroding everything around us, eroding us. If it can destroy worlds, the famous Robert Oppenheimer, quoting the Bhagavad Gita, what did he say? Time I am the destroyer of worlds. So even he understood the potency of time, but sometimes as devotees we forget the power of time. Because we are so confounded, so illusioned, so bewildered by the effects and the dictates of time in this world. There are many ways from which to view time, different types of time that we experience every day, every year, every decade of our lives, throughout our lives. One is, of course, the clock time, right? I'm sure some of you, as I started speaking, and you'll know my tendency is to speak for long and not thinking, shoo, what time is Prasad going to be? So you're looking at the clock and it's like you're thinking now, well, let's figure this out. And our day runs by the clock, right? We have to wake up at a certain time, we've got to be at work at a certain time, we clock in and clock out, pick up the children from school at a certain time, there's deadlines, all run by the clock, the hands of the clock. Or some of you may remember, what was it? The sands of the hourglass. Remember? Some of you are giggling. Why are you remembering that statement? The famous, what was it? The famous days of our lives. Yes, the sands of the hourglass. Anyway, right. So we function according to the clock time. Then we have biological time. Right? Biological time. What time we are able to go to sleep, what time we get up, what time we eat, what time we evacuate. So many things are there that are running along that type of cycle. Right? So biological time. Then you get psychological time. Heard of psychological time? How we function by it? I'm sure you've heard. When you're having a really good time, what does time seem like? It just goes. Time flies when you having fun. Or when you're not having a good time, like listening to me, gosh, when is he going to stop? It's taking so long, right? So psychologically we adjust ourselves and we experience time differently. Then you get societal time. Societal. Time according to society, trends, fashions, the moods and the natures of how different fashions and trends are developing. Like maybe now, I'm not sure really now, but okay, let's maybe talk about when I was a teenager entering university. So yes, it's expected according to society's norms and demands that when you are 20 or 21, you should be graduating from college. When you're 22, you should be getting a job. When you're 25, you should be earning, I don't know what, the 20, 30,000 rands a month at that time. And when you're 30, you should be married. When you're 32, you should have a child. You know, society has developed these time flags, these time stamps that you need to achieve this and this and this. Otherwise, you could be deemed a failure, right? And we find that the conditioned soul, the normal person in the world, the living entity, gets carried by these different types of time, isn't it? And we buy into it, we buy into that whole presentation, that whole advertisement, that a successful life is based on these things, right? But what, at the end of it all, what do you show for it? What do you have at the end of all this following of societal times, biological time, psychological time, the time on the clock? We have nothing to show for because you can never take anything. You put an investment into, I don't know, trust funds or mutual funds or into currencies, and you have a term of, fixed deposit, 5, 10, 20, 30 years. And, after 30 years, you're looking forward. And 29 years and 360 days, what happens to you? Ganga Mai ki jai. Ram Nam Satya hai. You die. And what happened to the 30 years of investment? You don't realize it. But you so patiently waited according to the dictates of society, according to our psychology, according to our bodily clock. So devotees, like Prabhuji was reading about Maharaj Parikshit, they function on a different time scale. A time scale where, an existence where time doesn't exist. Only eternity exists. And how do they reach that functionality? Uttama Shloka Vartaman, where they are fixed on Shastra, when they are fixed on the topics of this transcendental Lord. And by that fixture, that fixatedness on the topics of Krishna, hearing and chanting about Krishna, they get a very deep attraction for the lotus feet of the Lord. An attraction for the lotus feet of the Lord just doesn't mean looking at Krishna's lotus feet and admiring his ankle chains and the toe rings and the structure of his feet. That is there. Being fixed at the lotus feet of the Lord means serving the lotus feet of the Lord. Something practical. So when a devotee is fixed on hearing about the Lord, then by that hearing is then focused on serving the Lord, then that person is never bewildered in any way, especially at the most bewildering time, as is mentioned in the verse, the time of death, where everybody goes into some bewilderment. Regrets come into one's mind, and I wish I did this, I wish I had time for this, I wish I gave more time. But a devotee lives with no regret and leaves this world with no regret because of that consciousness that they have. So we need to assess ourselves, time is running out, am I ready? Just a couple of stories that just came to my mind now about, psychological time. There was a person who booked into a Airbnb, a multi-level, multi-story Airbnb apartment booked a apartment on like the 20th floor or something. And he noticed that the lift was very slow going up, taking forever. So he called the owner and said, you know what, can you all do something about making the lift go faster? You know, it's really too slow. Can you call an engineer, make some adjustments? And the owner said, okay, I'll sort it out. But he didn't call an engineer. Rather, he called a carpenter. And you know what the carpenter did? He put a mirror in the elevator. He put a mirror. And that was his solution. And after a week, that man who complained came back and said, wow, what a good engineer. This lift is moving really fast. Now, why is that? Because people don't realize how much of time they spend in front of a mirror. Right? Time just goes. What's the other thing in our lives that when we in contact with it, we don't realize how much time we can spend? Huh? What? Scrolling means the phone. Yes, the phone, the mobile phone. How many of you have that experience? Only one devotee. Only one honest person in the house. But connected to the phone is what? What makes the phone have the ability so that you can spend time on it? The internet, the Wi-Fi. Most people, when they come into some location, they look at their phone, is there Wi-Fi available? It's like oxygen, right? And when there's no Wi-Fi, you're thinking, wow, as what Lord Chaitanya says, one moment is like 12 years or more, and the world is so vacant in the absence of Wi-Fi, right? Because we're so dependent, because we need it, we need to apply our time in that way. Trump is worried about weapons of mass destruction in Iran. Rather, the devotee is very concerned about the weapon of mass distraction that takes away all of our valuable time, like this. So yeah, this topic of utilizing time in the most profitable way is very, very important. We need to look around us and see all the very amazingly, strategically, intelligently engineered distractions that are all around us. The world is one big conspiracy, really. It's designed by agents of Kali, agents of this age, simply to deviate our mind away from what is important. But devotees like Parikshit Maharaj, and now I'm going to very factually include devotees like Madana-mohan Prabhu. You know, they are revolutionists, they are revolutionaries. Srila Prabhupada was a revolutionary. Lord Chaitanya was a revolutionary. Tadvag visargo janataga viplavo. This Bhagavatam that Lord Chaitanya came to present by his own behavior, by his own personal life, is meant to create a revolution, a viplavo in the jana, in the misdirected civilization of this age. But it requires revolutionaries to stand up against this tide of time wasting. Because the whole world is wasting time. Because if at the end of our time, our life, if there's nothing to show for it, if you can't take anything with you, what has your life been? Shrama eva hi kevalam. Dharma swanustita pumsam vishvakshena katashaya. That all the dharmas, all the occupations you would have performed according to your position, if it hasn't developed a rati, an attraction for the topics of Krishna, then shrama, it's simply useless labor. So we need revolutionaries that will stand up and say, no, society, you telling me at the age of 20 I need to graduate? No, I'm going to be Madana-mohan. I'm not going to graduate. I'm going to move into the ashram. I'm going to stand against this tide.
I graduated.
Okay, he graduated. Oops. But he didn't go and work. I hope he didn't work. He didn't work. So, it's a revolutionary. This is I mean, how many parents today, oh my son, you've got a chemical or chemistry degree and you're not going to work? This is terrible. Would you allow your son to do that? Would you allow your son or daughter to be a revolutionary? This is a challenge to some parents here, right? Can have both. Just like one elderly man came to the temple many years ago, and because his son wanted to move into the temple, about a 21-year-old son, finishing up university. It was something similar to my life in a little sense, not the full story. This elderly man came with his son who wants to join the temple, and he was complaining to the ashram leader, Prabhuji, this boy, he wants to join the temple. But he shouldn't join. Prabhuji asked, well, why do you think he shouldn't join? No, he needs to live a normal life. Normal life. What is normal, What is a normal life? And the elderly man said, no, he should finish his studies, should get a nice job, find a nice wife, girl, get married, have a few children. And then when his children are his age, then sure, he can join the temple. No problem, I'll support him. Then the ashram leader, the Prabhuji said, okay, that's a good idea. I think that's a good idea. But you are at the right age now. Why don't you join instead? Why don't you follow your same process? No, Prabhuji, I think he should join. So we need to be revolutionary. If we are too concerned about being normal in the world, trying to fit into the dictates of the world, of how the world is structured, then there's something wrong. But if we are looking out of place because we are standing strong against the tide of Kali, this time-wasting tide of Kali, not giving our time to Krishna consciousness, but using it uselessly in so many other pursuits. If we are standing strong against that tide and we are looking out of place, then we are doing something right. So devotees, we need to have this confidence. And what is the result of that confidence? Is what was read in the verse in purport today. Because I know I have been with a few people, quite a few people. Well, one in particular who wasn't a practitioner of Krishna consciousness, but the rest who were devotees. And I've seen the deep bewilderment at the time of death, especially in that one person who wasn't practicing. Such deep confusion, fear, bewilderment, anxiety. But with devotees, when they pass away, oh my word, it's like, bring it on. That's how they would, bring it on already. I'm so happy for this transition. I'm tired of this body. I don't want it anymore. I want a better situation. But to get that conviction requires Uttama Shloka Vartman, to be focused on the topics of Krishna, who is glorified by the most choice verses, Uttama Shloka. So let us take this urgency away. Please take away cruise control from your lives. Always think of how I can accelerate more and more and more. We just came out of this huge, amazingly successful mega festival, the Durban Festival of Chariots. What a wonderful event. So pregnant and potent with Krishna consciousness at every turn you take, If it wasn't kirtan here, it was katha here. If it wasn't katha, it was prasadam. And, it was just all over the place. The deities, the devotees were so wonderful. We can't think now we've hit that high, okay, now we're going to chill, we're going to relax, hit the plateau. No, Krishna doesn't want that. Anandam buddhivardhanam. Krishna consciousness is ever expanding my nature. So, please take this urgency, find this urgency in your life. And the best way to find urgency in your life is to associate with devotees who have this urgency, who are revolutionary by nature, that whose lives you can clearly see are standing against the normal routine of the world. And when you live like that, then slowly and slowly you'll see your whole approach to time and your utilization of time will just change. Is that all right?
Yes.
Okay. So Madana-mohan Prabhu will be here for 2 more weeks, is it? Thereabout.
Yeah, in Durban.
In Durban for about 2 more weeks. He'll be giving many classes at the temple. I think day after tomorrow he's at New Jagannath Puri temple and some Namahata programs in different places. So please do take association of devotees who have urgency. Hearing, serving, getting your questions answered, your doubts clarified, and then you'll see something will take place in the heart. And and if you need appointments with the ashram leader at the Radharanath temple to join up, please come and see me. We're happy to take applications. Old and young. Old and young. Thank you all very much. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Wasn't it well proofread?
Okay.
Prove my point. Thank you. I just, as Swarup Damodar Prabhu was speaking, I remembered a line from a British poet named Thomas Eliot. He was a famous Thomas Eliot, and not that I read much of his poems or any, but I remember one line that he says, what you just described the distracting nature of this world, and he came up with the description of the world we live in. He says, distracted by distraction from distraction. Distracted from distraction by distractions. In other words, different distractions come up that distract us from even distractions, and they all compete for our consciousness to distract us in different ways. Before we get to I actually want to ask if you have any time for the questions, because we have already gone past the assigned time. And I think that anxiety about prasadam is palpable in the audience already.
That's another thing about the biological clock of Indians in Durban. We can have a full meal at 9 o'clock at night, which in other places is not really heard of, but we're sort of built for that, right?
And then the biological clock will come to haunt us the next morning, right? One thing before we get to the questions, I have 4 questions here. But one thing I wanted to remark on, the first thing that I noticed when I arrived here at the setting, because Swarup Damodar Prabhu spoke about how important, even pivotal, this location, this neighborhood is for the history of Krishna consciousness, not just in South Africa, but in the entire Africa, I guess, right? Because it all started from here. Like Shuddhi Prabhu was, devotees went to Kenya maybe, but the actual foothold was established permanently or profoundly. And what I noticed was tulisis growing everywhere. And it might not, I don't know if you notice, I did notice they were growing literally everywhere. They were sprouting through the cracks between bricks and pavement. And I remember that I had seen such proliferation of tulisis in 2 more places, actually 1 more place, because the other one I heard about. Number 1 is when Bhaktivinoda Thakur, when he had that vision of a great grand temple across the Jalangi river, and next morning he went to the place, he marked it, and the local residents, they said, well, this is a cursed place because nothing grows here except tulisis. No matter what we try to plant, potatoes or eggplants or pumpkin, nothing grows here, only tulisis grow here. We just gave up on that place, it's a cursed place. And then, of course, as we know, that they dug up and they found those pieces of Lord Chaitanya's Mridanga. But the second place I saw myself with my own eyes, and that was the place where Srila Prabhupada met Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur for the first time. Number 1 on Tadanga Road in Calcutta. Devotees took a long time to find the place because it was lost. They didn't know where it was, and eventually when they found it, it was dilapidated and was completely ruined. Only some walls were there, and the ceiling, the roof was completely collapsed, caved in, and there were some patches of the roof here and there. But what they saw, those patches of the roof, the flat roof, were overgrown with tulisis wall to wall. It was a cement floor. There was no water, no irrigation, no nothing, no soil. but tulasi somehow grew out of nowhere, out of cement, just because of the pivotal, the historic significance, so spiritually potent significance of the place. And they removed those tulasis, put them in pots so they could be replanted later on, and they sprouted up again. And then when I was visited, before it was renovated, and it's a wonderful place actually. I encourage you all strongly to go there and check it out. It's a wonderful, wonderful place. Now what devotees have made it into, it's a marvel. But when I was there, the devotee who showed me around, he told me, see? And I looked, and I saw a bare cement floor. There was nothing, there was some rubble, and there was tulasi, very robust, healthy looking tulasi growing out of bare cement. And the devotee told me there was no rain here for the last 2 or 3 months, and nobody watered her. But she was there. I have a video of that actually. So it shows to me also, again I mean it by very seriously, that the place where tulasis grow so strongly and so happily has something to do with Shilpa's special mercy. Those are like portals into the spiritual world, like that place that was discovered by Bhaktivinoda Thakur, and that place where Prabhupada had that significant historic meeting with his Guru Maharaj. And then here you see tulasis growing, and it's a very blissful sight to see them marking with their presence that historic significance of this location. La mercy. Just see of all names. So I don't know if we have time for questions.
Just one maybe.
One, which one? This is the shortest one, or what? Like?
Yeah, that's easy.
But it doesn't necessarily mean it's easy to answer. What is the significance of wearing the tulasi beads 3 rounds? Do you know? It's in Hari Bhakti Vilasa. It described how a Vaishnava should look like. It's not necessarily 3. It could be any odd number, 3, 5, 7, etc. But no less than 3. And Srila Sanatana Goswami quotes Shastra explaining how important it is to always keep in touch with Tulasi Devi on the neck, and also chanting on japa mala made of Tulasi, the holy name of Krishna. But Srila Prabhupada, again, a revolutionary as he is, once in his letter to a disciple wrote to him saying that if a spiritual master chants on a set of beads at initiation, then no matter what the beads are made of, they turn into tulasi. It's there. And we were fortunate in Moscow to have the original beads that Srila Prabhupada gave to the first 11 disciples of Srila Prabhupada, of ISKCON. 1 lady and 10 men at the first initiation. Mukunda Maharaj gave those famous round red beads for posterity, for safekeeping in Moscow. So sometimes, I must admit, I take advantage of my access to them and I chant on them. And somehow it feels like as if they're chanting on themselves. You don't even make any effort. That's the feeling I get, and also I gave them to chant on by some devotees. And they share the same feeling, that as if they're just moving on their own. Prabhupada invested so much into them. They were made of regular wood, I don't know what kind of wood, some hardwood, painted red. So wearing tulasi is important for us to be in touch with the Mahabhagavati Vaishnavi Tulasi Devi, who can bless us and bless our existence by being always on our necks. And I think there is a statement in the Shastra you may, I don't remember exactly, but there is a statement, if someone dies with tulasi beads on the neck, then it's almost like not a guarantee, but a very auspicious factor to be able to. Everyone should aspire to always aspire to accomplish at the end of life. How does it saying go? Sadan koro, bhajan koro, morte jan lehoi. You will know your accomplishments in bhajan and sadhana at the point of death. And on that point, Parikshit Maharaj, now we speak about him in the beginning of his encounter with Shukadeva Goswami. And then in the 12th canto of Srimad Bhagavatam, the very end of his instructions. Can I just read? That would be very good conclusion.
because it's in my pocket.
Shukadeva Goswami gives the final instructions to Parikshit Maharaj. And he tells him the 3 last instructions, then he will leave him to Takshaka. Therefore, king, endeavor with all your might to fix the Supreme Lord Keshava within your heart. Maintain this concentration upon the Lord, and at the time of death you will certainly attain the supreme destination. And now you could almost picture Parikshit Maharaj asking incredulously, but how can I do that? Because we know that the body becomes disrupted in its basic functions. And the next verse 50 answers that doubt. He says, my dear king, the personality of Godhead is the ultimate controller. He is the supreme soul and the supreme shelter of all beings when meditated upon by those about to die, just for the effort, for the cost of effort. Just because you're making an effort to remember him, he reveals to them their own eternal spiritual identity. Okay, and how do I do it practically? And then the next verse, the most famous one of the most famous verses in the entire Bhagavatam, he says, Kalyar dosha nidhyarajan astihyeku mahad guna kirtana deva krishnasya mukta sangha param rajat. My dear king, although Kali Yuga is an ocean of faults, Swarup Damodar Prabhu has just explained that, there is still one good quality about this age. Simply by chanting the Hare Krishna Maha Mantra, one can become free from material bondage and be promoted to the transcendental kingdom. And the Jiva Goswami explains that if someone manages to hear or chant the Hare Krishna mantra at the time of death, that by itself shows that he or she have already eradicated all offenses, have gotten rid of all faults in their spiritual lives, and have attained all perfection and blessings by that simple process alone. So that's what we could take away from tonight's discussion. Chant and surround yourself by chanting, or those who chant, like our dear Ravindra Swarup Prabhu. We ended with what we started with. Thank you very much.